Because this is a great question, right? It is this passage where she's feeling the two twins in her belly struggling. It says she goes to inquire of the Lord, and then she gets this prophecy about the two twins inside of her room, or the explanation in the prophecy about the two twins inside of her. So where did she go to ask the Lord about her pregnancy?
We good?
Are we still here?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Now we're back. I think you cut out for a second. You asked the question, where did she go?
Yes. The question is, where did Rebecca go to ask the Lord about her pregnancy?
So I have an idea, just based off of some of your other teachings and different locations, is that she went to Mount Sinai. That would have been a long journey for someone who's pregnant, but it's just a thought.
Okay. What about you, Matthew?
I'm not sure, but that's interesting what Josh shared.
Okay.
I have to meditate on that.
Well, I personally think it's much shorter of a journey. I think that Rebecca being married to Isaac and seeing where Isaac was dwelling near this area, and Isaac having been, the moment that Abraham dies, it says that Isaac is given the blessing of the Lord. This is the passing on of the priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
So what does a priest do?
Ministers before God on behalf of the people.
And what did that look like?
And or family.
What did that look like in a practical manner? What did in the Old Testament we see? If Yahweh doesn't change, his ways are consistent. What did Aaron do when Aaron ministered before the Lord? What does that look like? What did he do?
Sacrifices, burned incense.
So he went up to an altar
mm-hmm.
at a place where the Lord had chosen to put his name.
Yep.
Right. And that altar had to be built in a certain way. He brought certain ingredients. He brought certain animals, and he did it in a certain fashion to minister atonement for folks, or to minister thank offerings or praise offerings or vow offerings or first fruit offerings, or whatever the occasion, right? Whatever the context was. What was at that place where he chose to put his name that validated those offerings?
His fire.
Okay. But what was in that fire?
The angel of the presence.
That's right. So when in Aaron's day, when they had the tabernacle, and they had the pillar of fire by day, cloud by day, pillar of fire by night, hovering over the mercy seat above the presence of the Lord. Remember when Nadab and Abihu, they brought strange fire?
Yeah.
And then fire shot out and killed them?
Yeah. So
are we to believe that it was just magical fire coming out from the altar? Well, no, because the altar that was burning was the one where they made the sacrifices outside in the courtway, as opposed to in the inner Holy of Holies area. So above the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies area was where this angel hovered and hung out, and the one that also descended in the tent of meeting to speak with Moses face to face.
So are you saying that that there's an altar before there was the tabernacle, that there's an altar where the angel of presence stayed that Rebecca could have gone to?
So a few hundred years before Aaron was born, and before we get that whole story in Exodus, we have the same priesthood is already intact. The same Torah is already being followed.
Mm-hmm.
There's angels showing up everywhere in the Old Testament. We have, if our idea about Abraham being a priest as well, as Jubilees tells us he was, passed it down to Isaac. Isaac passed it down to Jacob. Jacob gives it to Levi. So they're ministering before something.
So basically, I'm just trying to follow here because this is new to me. So if she follows, so would she just essentially be going to her husband, who was the high priest, that's while he's actually officiating, doing the religious ceremonies in the presence of the angel of the presence, to say, hey, what the heck is going on here? And so instead of it being like, I always had envisioned that she would just kind of pray and that God gave her a vision or a dream, whereas she's actually right there, and the angel of the presence is like, okay, let me tell you what's going on.
Yeah, if it had said, she had a vision in her sleep and the angel spoke to her and said that, then that would have been easy, right? But it didn't say that.
Yep.
It said that she went to go inquire
Somewhere
of the
to
Lord.
inquire of the Lord.
What's the chapter in Genesis where Abraham was making the offerings and he built an altar?
Oh, several different. Chapter 12, chapter 17, chapter 22. I mean, yeah, there's.
So you think she went
But
to one of
that's
those
only
altars?
because he had moved around to different
Yeah,
places,
yeah.
and he established an altar of unhewn stone at the new place that he was going to stay for a while. But because basically, guys, it's explaining to us that he's engaging in a traveling tabernacle.
So you think that's where she went, to one of those altars?
I think she went to Isaac, her husband, who was the high priest of the covenant, and he's ministering before an altar that's been honored and dedicated by the Lord via an angel of the presence, just as we see throughout the rest of the scriptures. Do you guys, I don't know if you saw a couple weeks ago when I had Marlo on and we were talking about in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel chapter 8 and 9, that the angel of the presence that's over the temple actually moved and got up to go do judgment at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He was still there. Same angel of the presence that was there during the days of Moses and Aaron. It's the same angel. He's the one that makes that sacrifice get accepted. He's the one that oversees everything that's happening to make sure it's being done right. This is why Yahweh warns him in Exodus 23. Dude, he will not, don't play with this guy. He will not, forgive your transgressions. He's not here for that. He's here to oversee that you guys do these things as I've commanded you. Right. So the angels are their own priesthood. So there's like hierarchical levels of accountability that we're seeing here between the regular layperson that goes before the high priest of mankind, who's supposed to be very righteous. He's supposed to be doing the Torah properly, so that he can then in turn mediate for that transgression of that regular man on behalf to God. But since we're not in the temple in heaven like Yeshua is now, and we don't just get to directly look at the face of the Almighty, there's another mediator in between the high priest on earth and the God of heaven. And that's his angels he sends to facilitate this process, just like we see in the days of Exodus through Deuteronomy. So all I'm trying to say, guys, is I think it's been in here the whole time. Mm-hmm. We have the same Torah being followed before Mount Sinai. I think dispensational theology, and yes, Judaism does teach a version of just dispensational theology by saying that the Torah wasn't given until Sinai. And you're like, oh, come on now.
Yeah, you can see that's not true in the next chapter, verse 5.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, literally, we got Cain and Abel bringing first fruits in Genesis chapter 4.
Yeah.
So,
There's
what I'm saying? I'm like, guys, this is the Lord who changes not. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the Almighty. His character, his ways of right behavior doesn't change ever. And nor would it in regards to how he's set up a priesthood and a temple and an altar to minister atonement for sin. So Isaac is the high priest. His wife comes to him. They together, in my understanding, would go to either that. Okay, so there's two options here. All right, because we're not even talking about the Urim and the Thummim. Mm-hmm. What the high priest was supposed to have. It says in Jubilees 32 that Jacob, who had been given the priesthood from Isaac, when he gives his priesthood position to Levi, says he takes off the breastplate and the garments of the priesthood to give them to Levi. Does that mean he also had pockets in his breastplate and had the Urim and the Thummim like Aaron had?
I would think so.
I know, it's crazy, right? And so when I'm studying through this and I'm sitting there going, okay, I know that the Father's ways are consistent. He's asking Abraham to do the same behavior that he asked Moses and Aaron and all the Israelites later. Mm-hmm. So why would the administration of the priesthood be different? The Father doesn't preach dispensation theology.
No.
So why, if he's building an altar, which he would have had to make it of unhewn stones, and he would also is bringing the right ingredients, as we talked about last week. Jubilees 21 even details the right ingredients. In fact, Jubilees 21 gives you a speckle of detail that even Genesis through Deuteronomy doesn't, explaining that Abraham knew exactly the type of wood that he was supposed to gather from the forest to use for the sacrifice. We never get that instruction in Genesis through Deuteronomy. And it's interesting that there was like there was like 5 different types of wood you could use, and you couldn't use any other types. So I think that's interesting, because I've always wondered, why is it called a sweet and pleasing aroma? Because if some wood is not a sweet and pleasing aroma, right?
Well, if you've ever smoked any meats, I mean, there's people, they swear by, I smoke my ribs with pecan wood, or, oh no, you got to use hickory, or, oh no, you know, it's
You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So I think that it's interesting. It's very possible they just simply went to the angel of the presence that was already there. This is the same angel of the presence that Abraham would have said, hey, Father said he's going to send this angel, or the angel of the presence told me he's going to go with you. Meaning the Almighty has given permission to that angel to go with the servant to go make sure they found the right kinsman to bring back a wife for Isaac.
So just thinking about this, if Abraham and the priesthood, you were talking about this angel of the Lord, the angel of the presence, it seems to me like he was kind of always around then, like the way he was but because they didn't have the tabernacle, he would just be in wherever the place was that they were currently offering sacrifices that the Lord had kind of approved. Before we see, okay, so then that brings up another question. Then you had made a comment a second ago that there was, different levels of mediation. And so now that Yeshua is our high priest, we don't need the angel of the presence anymore, because Yeshua can go right to the Father on our behalf, and we can go right to Yeshua. That's like the extra benefit, and
we get the shortcut.
Okay.
Now, the Torah is still being followed, but because earlier there was no man that could stand in that position of authority above even angels. But as Hebrews 5 tells us, now we have this priest who's ascended through the heavens, who was chosen from amongst mankind. He's just been a glorified man now.
Doesn't Paul say somewhere that we have greater access or something like that? Like that would make perfect sense.
Yeah, it's through Yeshua. Now we have access directly into the throne room,
right,
as opposed to, now don't get me wrong, the angels were faithful in doing their priestly duties to take our prayers before the Father on our behalf. I mean, we even see this in Revelation chapter 5. They're still doing it as a part of their level of priesthood, right? They take the bowls of incense, which represent the prayers of the saints before the Father. But because that was a priestly duty, right? I think it's Exodus chapter 30, that Aaron has to make that certain incense. So, there's this whole process is not taught to us in Sunday school.
No.
Yeah, it's just spiritual. Jesus is our high priest. Okay, what does that mean? Well, he's a high priest. Someone I just saw in the comments said that Jesus is the angel of the presence. I personally don't. I know some people, it's okay if anyone thinks that, but I personally believe that Yeshua was sent at the appointed time, and that there's lots of scriptures that tell us he was hidden in the bosom of the Father until that appointed time to be revealed to mankind. And so he's not on the earth just walking around doing everything all the time. The Father has billions and trillions of angels that he made to do all this other stuff, But then in Hebrews, it talks about him being high, greater than the angels. So if he is the angel, how can he also be greater than?
Well, when he was resurrected to a place because of his obedience,
right,
to a position of authority in his priesthood and the Melchizedek order, greater than all the angels. You're right. But pre-incarnate, did he come down and do everything on the earth? People also think he was the king of Salem that Abraham paid tithes to back in Genesis 14. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so then Yeshua's birth through Mary wasn't his first coming. So he was already here as a king of the entire nation.
Yeah, I don't buy that one either.
I don't understand. That's not the way these words work. These words have meaning to them, right? So the Father tells us that his son was sent at the fullness of time, and in a certain moment of time appointed for him, not before. You know what I'm saying? So he's got all these other characters he created on day one, these angels, and there are hierarchy of priesthoods to do this stuff, and I mean, we see them interacting all throughout Scripture. So here's another fun question in regards to what we just been talking about with Rebecca. In Genesis 4, Cain and Abel bringing their first fruits. Who they bringing? Who's there making sure that sacrifice is good or not?
Well, that was it would have been after sin, so it would have had to have been the angel of the presence, the same one we see this whole way, because it couldn't have been before Yahweh. So, but then also, okay, sorry, there's a couple connections that are happening here. So, but what doesn't Zechariah, when he's in administering and the angel tells him that he's about to have a son, and he's like, I can't have a son, I'm old. He's like, I'm Gabriel, I stand in the presence of God. So doesn't that kind of tell us that the angel of the presence is Gabriel, not Yeshua? Because isn't that the same one that announces to Mary?
Well, there are, according to Enoch, there's 7 angels of the presence.
Okay.
So it could have been Gabriel, could have been Michael, could have been Uriel, could have been Phanuel. Depends on who's sent at the time.
But those are
Who's
specific beings, like they're specific angels. They've got their own names.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
And
I
their
mean,
duties.
the whole book of Jubilees tells us that the angel talked with Moses on Mount Sinai and telling him the back history of the patriarchs and how they kept Torah. That is an angel that he openly says he was the angel that was here and leading him there, and the one that spoke to Noah, and the one that we did this and we did that, and the one that showed up to Abraham, and the one that was in the bush, and like he openly tells him. And we have, the confirmation of that interaction within Jubilees with Paul in Galatians 3:19, with Stephen in Acts 7 verse 30 and verse 53, and also the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 2:1. It says that the law was mediated, which means explained and expounded upon, or the law was not mediated, but I can't remember the Greek word in Galatians 3:19 that Paul uses, but the law was ordained. He uses the word ordained as it's translated in English, but the Greek meaning of that means that it was basically explained and taught on Mount Sinai by angels. So we've got Old and New Testament confirmation that this angel of the presence is interacting and helping everywhere all the time. Think about the transition of Moses and Aaron and where they grew up in oppression in Goshen as the new Pharaoh took over, didn't know Joseph, started oppressing the Hebrews, and then takes them into a place. Some of the arguments in Exodus chapter 8 and 9 between the Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron is that the Hebrews were not able to sacrifice in the land of Goshen anymore. So I don't know how long that was taking place, but they had now been restricted by their totalitarian oppressors that they couldn't even worship God the right way, which the whole conversation with Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh was, let us go. Let us go with our animals, our children, all of our people, 2-3 days journey in the wilderness so that we may worship God. Right. So because they couldn't do it in the land of Goshen.
Right.
So now we have a generation in the land of Goshen that has forgotten all the ways that they're supposed to worship God properly.
Yep.
This is why at Mount Sinai, they have to be taught again. They have to
Retaught.
the fullness of the Torah is laid out for them. So because their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, did all these things faithfully. And as a result of their faithfulness, you guys have been saved from your oppressors from the land of Egypt and brought here. Now, will you do everything I'm about to tell you? And they all raised their hands, said, everything you tell us, we will do.
They're brave.
For 5 minutes.
Yeah. For 5 minutes, we'll do everything you say. Can't promise 5 minutes after that. But so guys, the point I'm trying to make, hopefully people in the audience are seeing this, is that there's consistency. The Father his expectation for us has been consistent this whole time. He tells us that this is his behavior, his moral, righteous law and behavior that's how he behaves in heaven. And he gave us that pattern to follow here on the earth. And this is what he wants us to do the whole time. That behavior doesn't change depending on, the different patriarch or something. So this is the point where I think it's fascinating that it's such an easy, light statement just sprinkled into Genesis that Rebecca would go to inquire of the Lord. Isn't that what we saw David do? Isn't that what we saw Moses and Aaron do? Isn't that what we saw all these other Joshua, all these other people in the scriptures where they would go to, they needed an answer for something. They went to the tabernacle where the angel of the presence was and inquired of the Lord.
Yep.
Now, that is one way they got answers. Another way is through the ephod, the breastplate. And I don't understand exactly how that works, but there was some process there as well, because there's a place in 1 Samuel where I think Saul asks if someone has the ephod so he can ask of the Lord, a question. But the point is, we already got Isaac and Abraham and the servant all interacting with this angel in the presence, in my opinion, from this story. So it would not be crazy to think that if Isaac's the priest, his wife would easily be able to go and say, hey, I got a question. Can we ask the Lord about this? Well, they go ask the representative that the Lord has sent them, who speaks on the Lord's behalf, this angel of the presence. So just like the conversation in Genesis 18 with the three angels that showed up and spoke with Abraham and Sarah, same concept. They got questions. They have a conversation.